Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to chase work anymore? Instead, you were able to direct your business development professionals towards specific opportunities in your specific target markets and give them the insights they need to develop the relationships with the right people, with the right projects in the right locations. Now, that may seem like a bit of a wish dream or a pipe dream, but that is the topic of discussion today with my guest, Chloe Smith. Chloe is the CEO and co-founder of Mercator AI, a construction intelligence platform that delivers project insights for general contractors and other types of construction industry firms. The whole idea of her company is to help you to stop chasing work and start focusing through the gathering of the right data and the application of that data to your business development activity on the right projects with the right people in the right locations. Enjoy my conversation today with Chloe. Share it with other people that you would think would benefit from listening. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Chloe, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
You know, there's a little phrase that we're all familiar with, FOMO, the fear of missing out. When you apply that to construction companies, what do you mean by that FOMO?
Yeah, I would say, especially with our customers, who we primarily target the folks involved or responsible for business development across general contracting companies. And for them, FOMO means, the fear of missing out on that perfect, ideal project that's, fits their specialty, fits the size that they're looking for, is in the right market, and they actually just miss out on because they're just too late. They're too late to hearing about it. By the time they, catch wind, it's no longer viable or at a viable stage for them.
As we're kicking off here, this is very interesting. I want to dive into that. Give us a little bit about your background in construction and where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background's actually in marketing and advertising, not in the construction space, actually in the business to business space and business to consumer. I've worked on numerous, large consumer brands that both you and I probably use today, helping business developers in the marketing and advertising space get up to speed very quickly on new markets. And so I've been building rapid intelligence tools over the course of my career. And coming from a construction family, I saw an opportunity specifically in that my father is obviously in his 60s. He's aging out. He's taking all these relationships with him. And ultimately, what does that mean for the business that he's leaving behind? And really kind of, starting to apply a lot of what we've done in the marketing and advertising space in terms of mapping markets and understanding the context of what's happening in and around a business and actually applying that into construction so that, we're not left kind of holding the bag, but rather we can see how the industry is shifting and changing, what opportunities are coming up, opportunities we may never have seen before, and really being able to take advantage of those without hiring more people or increasing our headcount or, looking at this as a people problem, but rather an intelligence problem.
Okay, so that's interesting because going back to this idea of business development, a lot of contractors, they hire a business development guy or gal, they send them out to some association events and they hope for the best. And typically that business development person doesn't necessarily have a ton of technical experience. So they may have a bunch of enthusiasm. They're generating a bunch of leads. They're bringing stuff back, but it's not really in my wheelhouse. So how can I leverage then data, as you're describing it, to make my business development people smarter?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say, smarter on that golf course too, right? And in our broker conversations that we're having. So basically, when we think about construction and we think about the data that gets produced, we actually want to think about how that data and where that data is being produced. And so the way that Mercator approaches it is we actually track the interactions that occur over the life cycle of land and the development of land. And then we map that back to the construction process, right? Your conception stage, your post-construction, or pre-construction, construction, and post-construction. Now, in terms of helping people become smarter with, how they use data to have better relationships or more informed relationships, we got to talk about the fact that data is never going to replace a good business developer. There is something about that enthusiasm, that charisma that's just never going to be reflected in data. But what data can do is help us be smarter and drive business decisions instead of chasing work. And so what I mean by that is, if we're able to tell you that there's a viable project at an early stage, at a stage that is early enough for you to come in and actually start consulting so that you can value or engineer value into the project instead of having it engineered out at the tender stage. We can do that by identifying who are the stakeholders so far, right? What's the work that's been done? What are the details of that project that we know about currently? And then as well, who are those stakeholders? What else are they working on? What kind of relationships have they had together so far? Is there an opportunity for you to bring a lot of value to that to that project and that engagement? And is it the right time to have this conversation, or should you be having more of a nurturing conversation versus a let's go after some work conversation? So really ensuring that instead of picking up the phone and saying, hey, what do you have going on right now? Being able to have meaningful and purposeful conversations at the right time.
Okay, that's really good. I like that. I pick up the business journal and I read contractor X is doing business with developer Y and they're building this killer project, and that should have been me. What are the main data points? What are the main gaps in people's business intelligence that exist that cause that to happen again and again? What are those main points that if I can get clarity in that area, that's going to help me to make sure that I'm surfacing all of the opportunities?
So I think that this is actually a good exercise for your listeners, right? In this moment, what are your triggers? Right? What would signal that a project is at an early viable stage for you? And that's going to be different. Company to company, that's going to be different. But in your specific example, by the time it hits the construction journal, everybody knows about it, right? And so the challenge there is if my understanding of the market is all up here, and I'm pointing to my brain here,
Yep.
it's all up in your head, right? How are you able to identify trends and signals of early work? Now, we do that today by taking people out for drinks, trying to find little breadcrumbs of opportunities. But if you don't even know who to bring out to a drink, right? Like if you don't know who to take out, then how do you know that you're in front of the right people at the right time? And I think that that's really where, that exposure, those data points, when we talk about land transaction, who's buying land, that might be, if that's the kind of stage that you're interested in, that might be your trigger. When somebody buys land in a specific area and is getting it rezoned, I need to have a conversation with that individual because I need to be able to show them, hey, we can support you, whether that be on your pro formas or whether that be, in terms of what kind of, interior you might be using. We've got a lot of modular construction customers that are on our platform that find projects early on at those stages so that they can help to inform, how are we going to actually build the thing? And as a result, how is that actually going to impact our pro formas? Because, hey, guess what? We engineer all the electrical into our walls. So you may not need as much electrical as you thought you would need, but you need to shift that money elsewhere. And that's how you're going to get your return.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those trends and signals. Let's assume for the moment that I'm a general contractor. I'm building commercial buildings in the geography that I'm in. What are some of those key trends and signals I should be looking at on a regular basis, regardless of whether or not I have a software package to do it or whether I'm just aware of it? What are some of those? Give me the top 3 or 4 trends or signals I should look at.
Oh man, I think you should be looking at, especially if you're going to do tenant improvements in commercial space, you should be looking at leasing changes. You should be looking at when real estate goes on and off the market. That's a good signal. You should be looking at potentially land transactions if that's something that you're interested in at that early stage. Sometimes that's too early for some of our, some folks in the mid-market. I would say looking at that kind of rezoning municipal hearing stage, especially for our public projects, commercial, private projects as well, that rezoning stage is supremely important because it's a good indication that, hey, there's work happening, we're investing money here. Looking at utility changes, sometimes it's a little late, depends on the type of business that you are, but utility changes is a great opportunity to understand, when are we feeding new utilities to a site? When are we doing early work? And then also you've got your permitting process. So depending on the stage that you're interested in, that permitting process can be a good indication.
Some of those are sort of micro trends that you're talking about there. They're very local. They're very, very specific to a project type. If you're not able to answer this is fine. But so for instance, Amazon just recently looked to convert a bunch of their office space that they're not using into other usages, and that is a indication of a broader macroeconomic change. What are some of the macroeconomic trends that I, as a contractor, need to be aware of and monitoring that will then filter down to the micro local projects that I'm going to be focused on?
Yeah, and this is something that we work on at Mercator as well. It's further down in our product roadmap, but certainly looking at external factors, right? You're looking at policy changes. That's huge. Most recently, locally, we've had massive policy changes about payback periods. You look at interest rates. You look at labor force is going to be a big one. But I mean, a lot of this is what your audience already probably knows about.
Yeah.
The trends that are impacting their business, but it's also impacting the business of the developers they work with, right? If we're seeing that there are massive layoffs happening and high vacancy rates, those buildings need to be repurposed. Just recently, we were talking with a group that was exploring vacancy rates in our local downtown and understanding, if we're seeing vacancy rates that are higher than usual, well, we still need to repurpose those buildings. How are we going to repurpose them? And then starting to speak with the property management teams and then the owners of those buildings to understand, okay, well, how are we going to shift and how are we going to be proactive about that? So definitely, I think a lot of what you see in the news today can actually help you have better conversations with your developers and your clients about what do we do next, knowing that these are kind of the factors that are coming at us from kind of a not in construction, but rather just generally on a macroeconomic scale.
Yep. So then, what are the biggest mistakes that contractors make when they have the information that you're referring to, but then they use it incorrectly or they don't leverage it in the way that they should? What are some of those mistakes that you're seeing?
Oh, I love this question. We often see people mass email and mass market. I want to create a world where we never send up, mass emails to people. It is so impersonal. There is still it's such a critical component in construction. We do work with people we trust, right? And you can't develop that trust in a mass approach. You have to do it strategically. And that means that having, being very insightful about what is that person's world, what are they dealing with right now, what are they focused on, and being able to be tailored. I know we're in a world right now where automation is king, and
Yes.
Being able to do things en masse is supremely important, but in reality, construction and business development will always be a person-to-person role. We can be more effective and more efficient, but it will always be person to person. And that's important because we are people building work together. And that is an incredibly collaborative process. And that requires a heck of a lot of trust and understanding of each person's motivations as they go into a project.
So that's interesting because really what you're doing here, Chloe, is you're articulating the limitations of technology, because it's tempting for someone to come in and say, I have the technology pill that solves everything. And what you're saying is that there is a utility for the technology, but there is also a limit to it based on the human aspect of business development and interaction that's so vital.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, Your company is Mercator.ai. So AI, artificial intelligence. What are you doing with artificial intelligence? How does that work? Give us a little insight. And I'm a dummy when it comes to artificial intelligence. So give me like I was going to say 10th grade level, but I'm going to go 5th grade level. Give me the 5th grade explanation of how your technology actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. I love kind of the explain like I'm five version of artificial intelligence. So I think something that we all have to kind of come to and understand is that um, AI is really just mass pattern recognition, right? And so we're recognizing patterns at a scale and at a level that us as human beings can't do. And when we think about how AI is applied at Mercator, basically what we're doing is we're taking all of these kind of disparate activities and events and changes and touch points that exist throughout the land development life cycle, and we are stitching all of those together using that mass pattern recognition to understand, okay, these activities, these events have occurred, at the same time, about the same topic in the same environment, et cetera, to be able to say, this is a project. And so it's a very different approach to how we've done this in the past. If you look at kind of traditional tools in the space, a lot of it has to do with people picking up the phone and saying, okay, well, tell me more about this project. Whereas we are actually detecting projects. And as a result, we are detecting what stage they're in. And as a result, then we're able to, pull together kind of a graph of who is working with who on what, where, when, and for how much.
Hey, this is Eric. It's time for the Construction Genius book. Ad. Yes, indeed. Chapter 11 of Construction Genius is called Sales. Know, like, trust, buy. In that chapter, I talk about how to identify the final decision maker, the 4 buyers you need to know, the psychology of selling, the 5 salespeople you employ without realizing it, harnessing all 5 salespeople for extraordinary results. And then the last part of the chapter is not to the swift or to the strong, but to the one who markets comes the success. All right. And the reason I'm sharing that specifically in this episode is because if you are going to identify the right clients with the right projects in the right locations through an analysis of data, then you need to be able to sell to them. And your technology is not going to help you to sell. At the end of the day, you're going to need people. And if you read Construction Genius, you're going to get sales strategies that your people will be able to use right away to improve your hit rate. So go out to Amazon, purchase yourself a copy, get a copy for every single leader in your organization, because I promise you, every leader in your company is involved in sales. And I would submit to you that every person in your company is involved in sales. So get them better at selling. And one way to do that is by reading my book, Construction Genius. Again, available on Amazon for only $19.99 a copy for the paperback. Right on. Okay, back to the interview with Chloe. What's the typical size of the general contractors that you work with? Revenue-wise, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically hit the mid-market. So anywhere from, 50 million to, 500 million in size. We have some larger clients that are in, or customers that are in the kind of $1 billion plus range. And then we also have some smaller customers that are in, the sub 500 million or 50 million range. But primarily we've been focusing on the mid-market, mainly because this is a group that has been kind of underserved by massive enterprise tools and kind of smaller tools that they're able to tackle or bring in, just because of cost of software. We also look at them as an opportunity to grow them. There's a huge opportunity to use a tool like Mercator to be able to step into a brand new market where it would have normally taken 4 to 6 years to set up an operation and boots on the ground and relationships. Being able to step into a market and within the first year, have cash flow positive on that initiative. So it's been a huge opportunity for us to be able to service that mid-market And at least for now, as we grow here, we'll also be providing additional tooling like, competitive intelligence, more market insight tooling. We'll ultimately transition into more risk detection, where we're able to understand, how litigious are companies, or are they paying their bills, et cetera, et cetera.
Speak to competitive intelligence as you guys are considering that. What are some key aspects of competitive intelligence that, as a general contractor, I need to be laying hold of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, we all wonder why we lost that project, right? And who we lost it to. And I think that understanding who won the project that we lost is, first off, critical, because it helps us to understand, okay, who are we losing work to consistently, or who's potentially stepping in and starting to own a larger market share. We know that our developers can sometimes be fickle, and our relationships last, 3, 4, 5 projects, and then they kind of step back into market and want to take a look around, see if there's other partners that are better fit. So understanding kind of when are those indicators starting to happen? When are we starting to see other companies kind of step in or step into our territory, or even take over some of our relationships? I think that those are a lot of the indicators that we need to start looking at, and also understanding how are they positioning themselves? How did they position themselves in that RFP that's different than how we did it? And then where can we win where they can't?
Going back to this idea of technology implementation, I've spoken to a lot of folks about this over the years. In your experience, and I'm hoping that you can speak. You don't have to name names, but speak specifically to your company. Why is it that someone would hear your pitch? They would get the logic of it, because it's a fairly simple logic. It's if I'm getting it, I'm sure my listeners are getting it. Why is it that a technology implementation fails?
And this is one of the hardest things for new technology. One of the reasons why it fails is because it's not easy to use. I once listened to a keynote from the folks at FieldWire, and they said one of the main reasons why they won at the beginning, at the very early days, is because their tool was dirt simple to use. And they focused on that user experience first and foremost, knowing that they didn't have all the features. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't all there. They actually made a concerted effort on making sure that the implementation or the usability of the platform was very, very easy, and somebody could come in and get value very quickly. And I think that that's something that's, we are, as an industry, risk adverse, right? And to take on something brand new is time and energy that could be spent elsewhere where we know it's going to be making money. And so making sure that that kind of usability and that first experience is very quick to getting value and to be able to perceive value is supremely important.
Okay, let's say someone has purchased your product and they're implementing it, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work for them. Why is it that it doesn't work for them?
Where we've seen, so it's been a couple of reasons. One of which is they don't have dedicated team members, and that's where smaller teams are not a good fit for our platform. It's really important that you have somebody who's dedicated and spending that time in Mercator.
You're talking about
because there's so much
specifically like a dedicated BD person?
Dedicated BD person or coordinator. Oftentimes that hub and spoke model is the best model, because you have somebody who's in there on a regular basis shooting out opportunities to other individuals that are tailor fit for them. Another reason why somebody wouldn't be able to really succeed in our platform is if they're maybe unwilling to see a shift in their own process. I think technology adoption has to be a two-way street. There's only so much we can do. And it has to come from the individual that they see this and self-qualify as they see this as a problem, and they really want to find a solution for it.
What is the main shift that someone has to make in order to be able to leverage your technology most effectively?
Stop looking at AI as something that's threatening your job, and start looking at AI as something that's augmenting your capability.
Okay. Why do people think it's threatening their job?
Because we don't understand it.
Okay.
And I think that early on when we were introducing our product, I mean, we've only been in market for about 18 months, right? We're a very new product. And early on, we very much, were positioning ourselves from an AI perspective. And that proved to be very difficult for the industry to take on, because they felt like, how I don't understand it. I don't understand the technology and how it could potentially either threaten me or do away with me or, potentially replace me. And that becomes very challenging. We want to put our backs up against that instead of embracing it. But if we look at it as, there will never be anything better than a fantastic business developer. Like data can't build relationships, then you got to shift that, right? And that starts to shift the perspective where you're starting to look at, how can I use this as a condiment, something to augment me, right? Something to make me faster, smarter, making, driving business decisions instead of just chasing work. How can I use technology in that direction? That's the shift that we've noticed that our customers are making. And they're going, okay, I see this as something that's going to help me make better decisions faster, instead of something that's going to take over my role.
Okay, so two key points there. This is really interesting. The one is that data can't build relationships, but it can help identify the relationships that you want to build, perhaps.
And augment you with the information you need in order to build them, with higher quality.
And what's interesting too is that other phrase that you just mentioned is this idea of chasing work. Because it seems like many times contractors get into this mode and they think this is just the way it's done, is that, well, I've just got to bid work. And if we bid enough work, our hit rate will be X. And so eventually we'll get some projects in the door. And it sounds like from what you're saying, Chloe, is that the data that you guys can bring to the table is such that you are able to, instead of chasing work, you can be way more targeted and intentional in the work that you're going after.
And proactive about those opportunities and proactive about those conversations. Absolutely.
What do you think the biggest mistake is business development people make when they are trying to build relationships with their target market?
Everyone's really busy, right? Especially in this industry. We're constantly so busy and our heads are down in the work that we're doing. And I think, coming to a conversation and asking, how can I help versus being able to support with, I understand what you're doing. I understand what you're trying to achieve. This is how I can support, and coming with solutions instead of just a question. I think that's a mistake that we make. And I wouldn't say it's a mistake, rather, it's just an approach. It's an approach that is, especially in a world where there's so much, we've got notifications coming in left, right, and center. Our inboxes are crazy. For somebody to reach out and say, I can help and I can help in this specific way, simplifies your client's job so much for the better that I truly think that that's where we're trending towards in terms of our relationships. Is, who are the people who understand my needs and can really provide me with solutions and provide me with ideas that I didn't even think about, instead of just asking me like, hey, how's it going? How can I help? And me having to ideate on your behalf.
Where do you see the use of AI in the construction space, let's say in 10 years' time?
Oh my goodness, I would really hope that we are at a space where we're taking a lot of this new, generative AI, and we're actually we're no longer interacting with tools from the perspective of, I'm bringing on this tool and I have to learn it and then I have to integrate it into my workflow. And, I have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different tools that I have to figure out how they all work together, but rather just say, this is what I would like to do. And we have technology that can seamlessly kind of incorporate and support you. Kind of, you think about an invisible user experience, right? Where, I often talk about the fact I have a degree in public relations, and we talk about the fact that, amazing PR is PR that you'll never see. And, in AI, I think very much the same. Phenomenal AI and phenomenal execution of AI is AI you never see, because it is just so seamlessly incorporated into how you work. And so, for example, being able to, ask natural language questions and get the answer that you need. Not all the data, not every single kind of, version in which you can slice and dice it so that you have to figure out what you want to look at, but rather just, you ask a question, you get the answer, you move on with your day.
Excellent. Okay. You said there's something very interesting. The best PR is the PR that you don't see. Little tangent here. Tell me what you mean by that and how that might apply for a construction company.
Well, I think what's interesting here is, whenever you see a PR scandal, like it's because, something went dramatically wrong. When you think of amazing PR, it's actually don't often think about it because it's just something that's a part of your day to day. I think that, oh my gosh, I'm scratching my brain for examples right now, but I do think about like, how we've so quickly adopted a lot of our own technology, right? And these kind of invisible user experiences, whether it be your Alexa or your Google Home, right? And now you're just talking into the ether to turn your lights on, or whether it's voice to text, and you're driving in your car and you're writing a text message to someone or recording a voice memo, being able to very quickly interact with your phone through prompts that you're not necessarily touching your phone or interacting with the actual device. You're just actually saying, hey, I'd like to send somebody a message, and this is the message I'd like to send them. Very simple things like that, I think, are, what I talk about when I say that, when it's done well, it's.
As a startup CEO, then, what's the biggest mistake that you've made as a startup CEO, and what did you do to fix that mistake?
You know what? I've stopped calling them mistakes and I've started just calling them learnings.
There you go.
Much from them. I would say early on, shifting over to finding what problem we were actually solving with our technology. I spent a lot of time listening to advice that, to be honest, my intuition has been the strongest driver to this vision so far. And I think probably maybe more of a learning than a mistake is trusting other people's perspectives when in reality I had a very strong vision and strong intuition. That's what I've been trusting.
Why do you think we do that? Why do we tend to trust other people's opinions as opposed to our own intuition?
I mean, I started the company when I was 27 years old. You're young, right? Yep. And you often think you have older people around you who know better than you. I think that's a big part of it. I was also a woman in a very male-dominated environment. That's played a big role. And, am I good enough? Am I, do I know enough to trust my own intuition? What I started to realize, though, was, more and more you would come back to, what decision did you make in the end? Ultimately, it was the decision you knew to make right off the get-go. And then you went and asked a whole bunch of people. And so I think validation, external validation is something that we always, look for of our own ideas, especially in a space that is incredibly risky. And when you're starting a company, it is incredibly risky. And so you're constantly looking for some sort of signal, especially in a place where there's no boss, there's no one person ahead of you who's got all the answers. You're kind of coming up with the answers on the spot.
What is that core intuition that you have?
I think it's a vision of what I believe the world needs to look like and what it should look like, and how I want to shape it, and kind of the legacy I want to leave, and what I think is possible, especially having known, and this is something that's very unique to us that isn't, a common thing for a tech company. Oftentimes people start companies because they were in industry and they, decided to step out and go and do something very specific in that industry and solve a problem that they specifically saw. We saw a very broad problem, and then went and applied it to a specific industry. And I think what that's given us is the ability to see beyond just, this is how we've always thought in construction, and this is how, traditionally we've always, perceived the world, and taking a perspective from kind of, the cutting edge. Marketing and advertising has always been kind of the cutting edge outside of probably video games, in terms of data and data usage, and taking that perspective to construction, I think is kind of a really driving home my intuition on, I've seen it work and I've seen what it can do. And I want to help my customers see it as well, and realize it, and the industry realize it ultimately.
So that's an interesting thing. So you're taking basically what's worked in another industry and you're making the analogy into construction. Did I hear that
Correct,
right?
Yeah. Correct.
And then as you're doing that, I'm sure you're learning a lot. But I think the core, this is the core, is that idea of chasing work. That's a phrase that we hear again and again in construction. And again, you're driving at what it sounds like you're driving at is making business business development decisions and activities more intelligent, more focused, and more specific.
Correct.
It's interesting. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you here, Chloe.
Yeah, absolutely. You can check us out at Mercator, MERCATOR.ai, and request a trial. We've got a huge wait list right now that's going into the fall, but we definitely want to hear from your listeners, especially if they self-identify with the problem. It's always great to be able to engage them and understand how do they want to be able to solve it, and then they can help shape actually how we develop this product over time. Like I said, we've only been in market for about 18 months, so very new product. And if there's anybody out there listening who's really interested in helping shape it, please do reach out.
Yep. And again, you're looking for those mid-market folks, $50 to $500 million. That's kind of your sweet spot, just so that people are clear on that.
Yeah, but we also were able to handle customers that are larger than that as well. I would say much smaller than that, it would be a bit more challenging, especially when it comes down to resource capacity.
Tremendous. Excellent. Chloe, last question. You were out of Canada there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What city?
Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Okay. So Calgary, if I'm in Calgary, what's the one restaurant I need to hit?
Oh, restaurant. Oh gosh.
I'm in the construction space as well, so it's likely not a vegan or a vegetarian one.
Well, you're in good hands. You're in Alberta beef country.
I know. That's what I'm thinking, barbecue or something, right?
Oh, I would say you got to go get a fantastic steak at Charcut.
Charcut.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. We will look it up and we will put Charcut in the show notes. So if you're ever up in Alberta, you can go to Charcut. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Awesome. Well, Chloe, I do wish you the best. Thank you for joining us here today on Construction Genius.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Eric.
You're welcome. This is Eric. Thank you for listening to Construction Genius. One thing I like about the interview with Chloe is that she understands the limitations of technology, but also the usages of technology. So go out to the website mercator.ai and check out the work that she is doing, helping construction companies to identify the right projects with the right clients in the right locations. Please give Construction Genius a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, thank you for listening to the show.